I know what you're thinking. If you've heard the stories, if you've read the reports, if you've seen the footage that circulates through the research networks now, then my first impression probably sounds ridiculous. But you have to understand the context. The first time I saw a human, my professional evaluation was simple. Pathetic. I am Clevith of the Ninth Spiral, Senior Xenobiologist for the Galactic Council's Biological Evaluation Directorate. For 30 standard cycles I have studied emerging species, cataloging their survival mechanisms, analyzing their evolutionary adaptations, determining their threat classifications. In that time I have evaluated creatures that could melt steel with digestive enzymes, organisms that communicate through electromagnetic pulses, and a hive species whose workers can regrow entire limbs in under an hour. Compared to those, humans looked like unfinished prototypes. The specimen stood in the center of the observation chamber, turning slowly as it examined the equipment surrounding it. 2 legs, 2 arms, a head balanced precariously on a narrow neck. No armor plating. No exoskeleton. No natural blades, fangs, venom sacs, or toxin glands. Just smooth pink skin stretched over a surprisingly fragile skeleton. Even the skin looked inadequate, thin, exposed, vulnerable to almost every environmental hazard I could imagine. I tapped a note into my data pad. Dermal layer appears extremely delicate. Vulnerable to puncture, tearing, heat, cold, radiation, atmospheric contaminants, and microbial infection. Beside me, my colleague Vanche leaned closer to the observation glass. Her mandibles clicked softly, a sound my species associates with amusement. This, she said, gesturing toward the human, is the apex predator of their world? According to the contact team, I replied. She tilted her head. The human looked up at the observation window and smiled. That expression alone should have been unsettling. Predator species usually display teeth only during aggression. But the human's expression wasn't threatening. It was friendly, which made the exposed teeth even stranger. Perhaps the reports were exaggerated, Vanche said. Possibly. I pulled up the preliminary file on my data pad. Species, Homo sapiens origin. Sol system, planet 3, local designation, Earth, homeworld classification, death world. I paused. That part still confused me. Death worlds typically produce organisms with extremely robust defensive adaptations. Armored hides, toxin glands, enhanced regenerative capabilities. Humans had none of those. Are we certain this is the dominant species? Vanche asked. Yes. How? Unknown. The human continued examining the room. He touched the metal railing surrounding the chamber, studied the overhead lighting, then leaned down to inspect the floor like an inquisitive child. This species conquered its planet? Vanche said skeptically. Apparently. She tapped the glass with one claw. I've seen larvae more intimidating than that. The human turned toward the sound. Again that smile. He raised one hand and waved. I stared at the gesture. Did it just greet us? Vanche asked. It appears so. Does it know we are evaluating it? Yes. And it's waving. I checked the psychological profile again. Humans apparently use gestures to communicate friendliness. An odd evolutionary trait. Most species avoided exposing appendages unnecessarily in the presence of unknown observers. But the human seemed completely relaxed. No defensive posture. No territorial display. No pheromone release indicating stress. He simply stood there with the calm confidence of someone attending a social gathering. That detail alone bothered me slightly. Creatures that lack natural defenses typically develop heightened caution instincts. This one didn't appear cautious at all. Shall we begin the evaluation? Vanche asked. I hesitated. Something about the human's posture felt wrong. Not threatening. Just unusual. Like a prey animal that didn't realize predators were nearby. Or worse, one that did. And simply wasn't concerned. Still, protocol was protocol. I activated the communication system connecting the observation deck to the chamber below. The speaker crackled softly. The human looked up immediately. Hello, he said cheerfully. I was wondering when this part would start. His voice was smooth and oddly melodic. The translator struggled for a moment before stabilizing. I am Clevith of the Ninth Spiral, I said formally. This is Vanche of the Western Hives. We will be conducting the biological and sociological evaluation of your species. The human nodded. Nice to meet you both. Please state your name and role. My name is Jack Reeves, he said. I'm here representing humanity in the Galactic Council admission process. Vanche leaned toward her microphone. And you are a warrior? Jack blinked. Then he laughed. No, he said. I'm a schoolteacher. Vanche slowly turned her head toward me. The apex predator of a death world had sent a teacher. I made another note on my data pad. Species confidence levels appear irrationally high. Then I asked the first real question. Human Reeves, I said. What natural weapons does your species possess? Jack scratched the back of his head. Well, he said thoughtfully. None really. And that was the moment everything should have seemed perfectly normal. Instead, it was the moment the entire evaluation began to go wrong. For 3 full seconds after Jack Reeves said, None really, neither Vanche nor I spoke. That sounds absurd now, given everything that followed, but at the time it was deeply reassuring. No natural weapons. Good. That was normal. That was manageable. That was exactly the kind of answer you wanted from a species applying for admission to the Galactic Council. I relaxed slightly and tapped the response into my data pad. No claws. No venom. No natural striking surfaces. No visible offensive biological adaptations. Beside me, Vanche gave a tiny satisfied click. Perhaps this really was going to be simple. Clarify, I said, settling into my professional tone. Your species possesses no natural offensive traits whatsoever? Jack considered that. Well, we can bite, he said. Vanche snorted. I'll admit I almost did too. Every carbon-based organism with a mouth could bite. That barely counted. We also throw things pretty well, Jack added. I paused, stylus hovering over the pad. Throw things. Yeah. Rocks, spears, balls, tools, whatever's nearby. Humans are weirdly good at that. Vanche folded 2 of her arms. That is not a natural weapon. True, Jack agreed cheerfully. But it turns most things into one. Something about the answer made the small sensory spines along my neck rise. Not because it was threatening. Because it was pragmatic. There is a difference. A threatening answer tries to impress you. A pragmatic answer simply states a useful truth. I filed the note anyway. High environmental weaponization potential. Proceeding, I said. List your species' passive defenses. Jack's face scrunched in thought. That expression was rapidly becoming irritating. Humans, I would later learn, have dozens of tiny facial movements that signal concentration, confusion, amusement, uncertainty, or polite disagreement. At the time it just looked like his face was malfunctioning. Passive defenses, he repeated. We heal okay? Vanche leaned toward the microphone. Define okay. Well, cuts close up. Broken bones mend. We can survive a surprising amount of damage if someone gets us treatment fast enough. Some organs can regenerate a little. The liver's particularly good at it. I lowered my stylus. You regenerate internal organs. A bit. Not full replacement or anything dramatic. Just partial recovery. That was already more than most council species could do. Continue, I said carefully. Jack counted on his fingers. We've got sweat for cooling. Pretty good endurance. Decent immune systems, though that depends on where you live and what you've been exposed to. We can function through pain longer than we probably should. Adrenaline helps with that. Vanche looked at me. What, she said slowly, is adrenaline? Jack brightened. Oh, it's a hormone. Stress response chemical. Makes us faster, stronger, less sensitive to pain for a little while. I stopped writing. Your bodies, I said, produce chemical combat enhancers. Jack laughed again. When you say it like that, it sounds much cooler than it is. Vanche's skin shifted toward pale amber, her species color for discomfort. It is exactly as disturbing as it sounds, she muttered. Jack either didn't hear her or pretended not to. I resumed the formal sequence. Very well. Next category. What is the hazard classification of your homeworld? Jack's expression changed again. This one I would later learn meant trying to answer honestly without sounding insane. He said. Pretty high. The official council scale ranged from 1 to 10. 1 meant a biologically forgiving world with minimal predators, stable climate, low seismic activity, and low endemic toxicity. 10 meant a world so hostile that only highly specialized life survived there. We require a number, I said. Jack rubbed his jaw. I mean, Earth has predators, parasites, disease, storms, wildfires, droughts, freezing winters, deserts, poisonous plants, venomous animals, ocean hazards, tectonic activity, and occasionally weather systems big enough to destroy cities. Silence. Vanche slowly turned toward me. Occasionally, she repeated. On the plus side, Jack added helpfully, most of that doesn't happen all at once. My dorsal spine's fully extended. Your species evolved there, I said. Yep. and remained the dominant life form. That's the general outcome, yeah. How? Jack smiled. That smile again. Not aggressive. Not defensive. Just deeply, deeply unhelpful. We adapted, he said. That is not an explanation, Van Chase snapped. It kind of is for us. I activated the secondary recording systems. This interview had just stopped being routine. Explain adaptation in operational terms, I said. Jack shifted his weight and sat cross-legged on the floor of the chamber, as though we were having a casual conversation and not a high-level species evaluation that could determine the future of interstellar diplomacy. We weren't the strongest thing on Earth, he said. Not even close. Lots of animals were bigger, faster, or better armed. So we got smarter. Worked together. Made tools. Learned patterns. He held up one hand. If something had claws, we made spears. Another finger. If something had armor, we made sharper spears. A third finger. If something was faster, we learned to trap it. A fourth. If something was stronger, we found ways to attack it from a distance. He folded his hand again. And if something was still a problem after that? He smiled. We made better tools. Vanch's breathing spiracles visibly opened. That is not adaptation, she said. That is escalation. Jack nodded. Sure. We do that too. I looked down at my pad, then back at the human. His tone remained light. Friendly. Almost playful. But the underlying logic of his species was beginning to emerge, and I did not care for it. Most species describe survival as defense. Avoidance. Concealment. Retreat. Humans, apparently, described survival as a design problem. If the environment threatened them, they did not merely adapt to endure it. They altered the equation. That was not how prey thought. It was not even how most predators thought. It was how engineers thought. I asked the next question more slowly than protocol required. What was the most destructive weapon your species developed before leaving your atmosphere? Jack blinked once. Oh, he said. Nuclear weapons probably. Van Chase made a choking sound. I set my stylus down very carefully. You developed civilization-ending weapons, I said, before achieving interstellar flight. Jack nodded. Yeah. The room felt smaller. Against whom? I asked. Jack's answer came instantly. Each other. And just like that, the human species stopped being amusing. For a long moment after Jack said each other, neither Van Chase nor I spoke. The translator continued humming quietly. The observation room's air recyclers produced a steady mechanical whisper. And in the center of the chamber below us, the human representative of an entire species sat cross-legged on the floor like a student waiting for the next question. I looked down at my data pad again. The line I had just written suddenly seemed inadequate. Species developed nuclear weapons prior to spaceflight. Used in intraspecies warfare. That single sentence did not capture the magnitude of the statement. It barely captured the insanity. Van Chase recovered first. Her mandibles opened slightly in a gesture that, among her kind, meant controlled alarm. You created weapons capable of destroying your world, she said slowly. Jack nodded. Well, technically several times over. The observation room went silent again. You are exaggerating, Van Chase said. I wish I were, Jack replied. He leaned back slightly, resting his hands on the floor behind him. We built thousands of them during the Cold War. Still have plenty left. Most are dismantled now, but yeah, for a while there we had enough nuclear warheads to wipe out civilization multiple times. I felt one of my stomach chambers tighten. You possess the capability to end your species, I said carefully. Yes. And you deployed these weapons. Jack's expression changed slightly. Less cheerful now. More thoughtful. We used them twice, he said. Against each other. Van Chase leaned closer to the glass. And you survived this. Barely, Jack said. But yes. The implications cascaded through my mind like a chain reaction. Species normally develop planet-scale weapons only after achieving space travel, usually as a response to interstellar threats. Humans had done it while still confined to their own world. Not against alien invaders. Not against extinction events. Against themselves. I made another note. Species exhibits extreme internal conflict tolerance. Why? Van Chase demanded. Jack shrugged. That strange human gesture again, shoulders rising and falling as if the answer were obvious. Fear mostly, he said. And competition. Competition, Van Chase repeated flatly. Yeah. Two big alliances developed the technology around the same time. Neither trusted the other not to use it first. So they kept building more. To destroy their enemies. To discourage them from attacking, Jack corrected. Vanche stared. You built weapons to prevent war. Exactly. That is contradictory. Welcome to human strategy. I leaned forward slightly. Human Reeves, I said. Yes. Your species developed weapons capable of annihilating your civilization. Correct. You used them in war. Yes. And then, what? Jack scratched his head again. Well, he said, after we realized how bad an idea that was, we spent the next several decades trying very hard not to do it again. Trying? Vanche repeated. Jack grinned. Progress takes time. I looked down at my pad. My neat classification categories were beginning to unravel. Normally species evaluations followed predictable patterns. A species evolved natural defenses. Those defenses shaped their psychology. Their psychology shaped their civilization. Everything followed a logical evolutionary progression. Humans did not appear to follow that pattern at all. You created the most destructive weapons in your world's history, I said slowly. Yes. You used them. Yes. And then you collectively decided not to use them again. Jack nodded. Pretty much. That implies restraint. Eventually. But the capability remains. Of course. The room felt colder. Why? I asked. Jack tilted his head. Why keep them? Yes. His answer came without hesitation. Because we're human. That is not an explanation. Jack smiled again. You'll see. That answer sent a faint chill through my dorsal spines. Vanche cleared her throat plates. Moving on, she said quickly. Your social structure. Jack brightened again. Oh, that's a fun one. Explain. Well, Jack said, humans live in groups. Families, communities, nations. Nations. I interrupted. Yeah. How many? Jack thought for a moment. About 200. Vanche's mandibles froze. You mean 200 administrative divisions? No, Jack said. 200 sovereign countries. I stared at him. You are not politically unified. Nope. You share one planet. Yes. And it is divided into 200 competing governments. More or less. Vanche leaned heavily on the observation console. You wage war with yourselves, she said. Jack nodded. Sometimes. Using nuclear weapons. Not recently. That is not reassuring. Jack chuckled. Look, humans argue a lot. Different cultures, different ideologies, different priorities. And this leads to war. Sometimes. How often? Jack thought for a moment. Well, historically? Yes. Every few decades. Vanche's skin shifted toward pale yellow. The color of shock. You destroy yourselves regularly. We try not to, Jack said. That is not what your history indicates. Jack shrugged again. We're working on it. I stared at him through the observation glass. A species that evolved on a death world, lacked natural weapons, compensated through technology, it created civilization-ending weapons, fought global wars, survived them. And then, somehow, applied for Galactic Council membership. The logical contradictions were overwhelming. How, I asked quietly, did your species survive long enough to become spacefaring? Jack's answer was immediate. We refused to quit. That is not scientifically rigorous. Sure it is. Jack leaned forward slightly. We're not the fastest species on Earth, he said. Not the strongest either. Plenty of animals could kill us if we fought them head-on. He tapped the floor lightly with one finger. So we didn't fight them head-on. Explain. Jack smiled again. Persistent hunting, he said. I waited. What is persistent hunting? Vanche asked. Jack leaned back again. It's simple, he said. If something is stronger than you, run. If something is faster, follow it. If something is dangerous, keep chasing it. For how long? I asked. Jack's smile widened slightly. Until it collapses. The observation room went completely silent. You hunted predators through exhaustion, Vanche whispered. Yep. Over what time period? Jack thought about it. Sometimes hours, he said. Sometimes days. Days? Vanche repeated faintly. Jack nodded. We're really good at endurance. He pointed to his legs. Our bodies evolved for long-distance running. Sweat cooling, efficient muscles, upright posture. We just keep going. And the predator? Jack shrugged. It eventually stops. And then? We eat it. I felt something unpleasant settle in my third stomach. Your species' strategy, I said slowly, is harassment. Jack laughed. We prefer the term persistence. I closed my data pad. The evaluation was no longer simple. The problem was becoming clearer. Humans were not physically impressive. They were not biologically specialized. But they possessed something much more dangerous. They did not stop. And a species that refused to stop was extremely difficult to defeat. By the time we reached question 34 in the evaluation protocol, the neat structure of the interview had begun to collapse. That had never happened before. Species evaluations were designed to be predictable. Biology followed patterns. Evolution followed patterns. Behavior followed patterns. Humans followed none of them. I reopened my data pad and forced myself back into procedure. Next category, I said. Pain tolerance. Jack looked up at the observation window. Pain tolerance? Yes. At what level of injury does your species typically cease functioning? Jack blinked. That varies. Specify. He scratched the back of his head again. Well, most people stop if something hurts badly enough. Broken bones, serious injuries, that sort of thing. That sounded normal. I made a note. Standard mammalian pain response. Then Jack continued. But sometimes people don't. My stylus paused. Explain. Jack shrugged. There are lots of cases where humans keep going even when they're badly injured. Soldiers finishing missions after getting shot. Firefighters running into burning buildings. Parents lifting heavy objects off trapped kids. Vanche leaned toward the microphone. What kind of heavy objects? Jack thought for a moment. Cars sometimes. The observation room went completely silent. You are claiming, Vanche said slowly, that a human can lift a ground vehicle. Jack nodded. Not normally. But adrenaline can do weird things. You mentioned this chemical earlier, I said. Adrenaline. Right. You are saying your bodies can temporarily override pain and strength limitations. Pretty much. And this occurs frequently? Jack grinned. Only when things get really serious. My dorsal spines rose again. Because if humans could temporarily exceed their physical limits under stress, then their baseline measurements were misleading. Which meant the evaluation numbers we had been collecting were incomplete. Your species, I said carefully, possesses an emergency biochemical enhancement system. Jack laughed. I guess that's one way to describe it. Vanch's skin color shifted again. Dark amber now. Concern. I continued. And your recovery rate? Jack shrugged. Pretty good actually. Define good. Well, broken bones heal. Cuts close up. Muscle repairs itself. If we have medical care, we can survive injuries that would kill most animals. I tapped the stylus slowly against the pad. Examples. Jack looked thoughtful. People surviving falls from aircraft. My stylus froze. Surviving lightning strikes. Vanche made a choking sound. Continuing to function after losing limbs. The stylus slipped from my grip. It hit the observation console with a soft click. You are exaggerating, Vanche said. Jack shook his head. Humans are fragile in some ways, he said. But we're weirdly hard to kill. He paused. Also, we invented medicine. That does not make you biologically resilient, Vanche snapped. Jack shrugged. It helps. I picked up the stylus again. Next question, I said. But my voice sounded slightly less steady than before. How does your species respond to fear? Jack's expression changed. Not cheerful now. More thoughtful. That's complicated. Explain. Well, he said slowly, fear is a survival instinct. It tells us when something is dangerous. That is normal for most species. Sure. But humans also do something strange with it. What? Jack smiled again. We ignore it. Vanche stared. That is irrational. Sometimes. Fear exists to prevent death. True. And you disregard it. Sometimes you have to. Why? Jack leaned forward slightly. Because fear doesn't mean something is impossible, he said. It just means it's dangerous. The observation room was quiet again. And when something is dangerous, I asked carefully, what do humans do? Jack's answer came instantly. We do it anyway. Vanch's mandibles opened slowly. That, she said, is the most irrational survival strategy one have ever heard. Jack chuckled. Yeah, we get that a lot. But why? I demanded. Because sometimes the alternative is worse. Jack spread his hands. If a building is on fire and someone's trapped inside, fear says stay out. Yes. But people run in anyway. Why? Jack shrugged. Because they care. The simplicity of the answer was unsettling. Most species valued survival above all else. Humans apparently sometimes prioritized others over themselves, which was biologically inefficient, and yet powerful. I continued with the evaluation. Describe your species' relationship with other life forms on your world. Jack brightened again. Oh, that's one of my favorite topics. I was beginning to dread those words. How so? I asked cautiously. Well, Jack said, humans form relationships with other species. That is common among intelligent life. No, I mean emotionally. I frowned. Clarify. Jack held up one finger. Dogs. Another finger. Cats. Another. Horses. Another. Birds. Another. Reptiles. Another. Fish. Vanche blinked. You domesticated multiple predator species. Yep. And prey animals. Yep. For food. Sometimes. For labor? Sometimes. For companionship. Vanche froze. You keep predators as friends. Jack nodded. Pretty much. That is biologically absurd. Jack shrugged. They seem to like it. I stared down at my notes. Humans bonded with predators. Formed emotional attachments with animals. Kept dangerous creatures in their homes. That wasn't normal. It wasn't even logical. But it revealed something important. Humans did not simply adapt to their environment. They reshaped relationships within it. Predators became partners. Resources became tools. Threats became challenges. It was the mindset of a species that believed nothing in the universe was fixed. I closed my pad again. The evaluation should have been nearing completion. But the more we learned about humans, the less certain their classification became. Human Reeves, I said slowly. Yes. There is one thing about your species that remains unclear. What's that? Why are you so calm? Jack looked confused. Calm? Yes. You are alone in an alien facility. Yes. Surrounded by species stronger than you. Probably. You have no visible weapons. Correct. And yet you appear relaxed. Jack thought about that for a moment. Then he smiled again. Because you haven't tried to kill me yet. The simplicity of the answer made my spine stiffen. And if we did? Vanche asked. Jack shrugged. Well, he said. I'd figure something out. And in that moment, for the first time during the entire evaluation, I believed him. After the evaluation ended, Vanche and I remained in the observation room long after Jack Reeves had left the chamber. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the environmental systems and the faint clicking sound of my stylus tapping against the console. Below us, the evaluation chamber stood empty. But it didn't feel empty. It felt disturbed. Like a puzzle that had been taken apart and reassembled incorrectly. Vanche finally broke the silence. Well, she said. That was unsettling. I nodded slowly. Yes. She leaned against the console, folding two of her arms tightly across her thorax. They have no armor. Correct. No venom. Yes. No claws, no exoskeleton, no natural weapons. Yes. And yet they developed civilization-ending weapons before leaving their atmosphere. Yes. And they survived their own wars. Yes. And they appear psychologically comfortable with danger. Yes. Vanche stared at the empty chamber again. That should not be possible. I agree. Species normally followed predictable survival strategies. Some evolved strength. Some evolved speed. Some relied on venom, toxins, camouflage, or regenerative abilities. But all of those strategies had one thing in common. They were biological. Humans had taken a different path. They had replaced biological advantage with innovation. And innovation had no evolutionary ceiling. I turned back to my data pad and opened the threat classification framework. Every species evaluated by the Council received a rating. Class 1, harmless. Class 2, minor environmental hazard. Class 3, moderate defensive capability. Class 4, regional predator. Class 5, high-threat biological species. Class 6, technologically aggressive civilization. Class 7, expansionist civilization. Class 8, existential planetary threat. Class 9, uncontrolled destructive species. Class 10, extinction-level species. Most civilizations never exceeded Class 5. Only a handful had reached Class 7. Class 8 was rare. The last species assigned that rating had nearly destroyed 3 inhabited systems before their expansion was halted. I looked at the human data again. No natural weapons. No armor. No venom. Physically fragile. Yet they had conquered a death world, invented planet-killing weapons, survived global wars, demonstrated extreme adaptability, displayed unpredictable psychological resilience. The classification model struggled to process that combination. Van Che leaned over my shoulder. What rating are you considering? I'm not certain. You cannot possibly assign them Class 8. I might. She recoiled slightly. That classification is reserved for species with catastrophic destructive potential. Yes. Humans barely survive their own history. That may be exactly why they are dangerous. Van Che tilted her head. Explain. I scrolled through the interview transcript. Most civilizations develop stability before technological power, I said. They build strong social systems before acquiring weapons capable of destroying themselves. Yes. Humans did the opposite. Vanch's skin darkened slightly. They gained destructive power first. Yes. And somehow learned restraint later. Exactly. That pattern was unique. Dangerous species usually escalated conflicts. Humans appeared to do something different. They survived the escalation. Then tried to correct it. Not perfectly, but gradually. I closed the report file and looked out the observation window again. Humans should not exist, I said quietly. Vanch's mandibles clicked. That is a dramatic statement. Look at their evolutionary profile. She did. I continued. They are physically weaker than most predator species. Yes. They lack natural defenses. Yes. They evolved on one of the most dangerous worlds in their sector. Yes. And yet they survived. Van Che slowly shifted her posture. That implies something. Yes. What? That evolution produced something more dangerous than claws. What? I tapped the screen again. Persistence. Van Che read the word. Persistence. They do not stop, I said. They cannot overpower most threats. So they outlast them. They cannot outfight stronger predators. So they outthink them. They cannot avoid danger completely. So they adapt to it. I pulled up Jack's statement from earlier. If something tries to kill us, we figure out how to kill it back, but harder. Van Che read the line twice. Then 3 times. That is not normal predator behavior, she said. No. What is it? Engineering. Humans treated survival like a problem that needed solving. And problems had solutions. Even impossible ones. Van Che folded her arms again. So what do we tell the Council? That was the real question. The classification report would determine humanity's status. Admission to the Galactic Council. Quarantine. Observation. Or rejection. I looked at the data again. The contradictions remained impossible to resolve. Humans were fragile but resilient, emotional but strategic, peaceful but capable of devastating war, individually weak but terrifyingly effective in groups. Most species fit neatly into categories. Humans fit into none of them. Finally I began typing. Species assessment. Homo sapiens. Conclusion. Highly adaptive social predator with extreme technological escalation potential. Recommendation. Threat classification level 8. Van Che stared at the number. You are serious? Yes. That rating implies humanity could become a system-level threat. They already possess the capability. And you want to admit them to the Council? Yes. That is reckless. Perhaps. Why? I looked back at the empty chamber where Jack had stood earlier. Because they are trying to join us. Van Che frowned. That does not guarantee peaceful intent. No. But it shows curiosity. And? Curiosity built their civilization. Van Che thought about that. Then she asked the most important question. What happens if the Council rejects them? I paused. That possibility had been bothering me since the interview ended. If we reject them, I said slowly, they will continue developing alone. Yes. They will expand eventually. Yes. And when they reach the wider galaxy. Van Che finished the thought. They may not ask for permission next time. Exactly. Humans had voluntarily approached the Council. That meant they were still interested in cooperation. Still curious. Still hopeful. Rejecting them could change that. I finalized the report. Then we tell the Council the truth. What truth? I closed the file. The truth is that humans are dangerous. Van Che nodded slowly. Yes. But they may also be exactly the species the galaxy needs. She looked confused. Why would we need something dangerous? I remembered Jack's smile. and the quiet confidence in his voice. Because the galaxy is not a safe place, I said. And humans? I paused. Do not give up. 3 cycles later, I stood in the Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council. It is difficult to describe the scale of that chamber to anyone who has never seen it. The hall was so vast that artificial weather systems operated near the upper atmosphere of the dome. Thin clouds drifted across the ceiling. Controlled sunlight filtered through crystalline panels. Entire ecosystems had been designed into different sections to accommodate species from thousands of environments. And on that day, nearly 300 civilizations were present. All because of one species: humans. My report hovered in the air around me in dozens of holographic displays, each one projecting data, biological models, and historical timelines from Earth. The assembly was restless. Word had spread quickly. A fragile species from a death world. A civilization that had invented planet-killing weapons before reaching the stars. A species with no natural defenses but an alarming history of surviving things it should not. Some representatives leaned forward with curiosity. Others watched with open suspicion. A few looked genuinely afraid. At the center of the chamber stood Council Prime Thexalo, a towering being of crystalline lattice structures that refracted the hall's light into shifting colors. When Thexalo spoke, his voice resonated through the entire chamber like a bell. Xenobiologist Clevith of the Ninth Spiral, he said. Yes, Council Prime. You have submitted a recommendation that humanity be classified as Class 8. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Class 8 classifications were rare. Extremely rare. You are aware, Thexalo continued, that this classification is reserved for species capable of catastrophic destruction. I am aware. And yet you have assigned it to a species with no natural weapons. Yes. The murmuring grew louder. Several representatives flashed colors of disbelief. One of the reptilian delegates raised a claw. This is absurd, the delegate hissed. How can a soft-skinned mammal warrant a threat rating of 8? Another voice joined in. They lack claws. They lack armor. They lack venom. They barely survived their own history. I waited. The protests needed to burn themselves out before anyone would listen. Finally Thexalo raised one massive crystalline limb. Silence returned. Explain your reasoning, he said. I activated the main display. Images from the human evaluation appeared above the chamber. Jack Reeves smiling in the observation room. Historical footage from Earth. Cities. Wars. Rocket launches. Nuclear detonations. Humans possess no natural biological weapons, I said. That is correct. But they compensate for this with something far more dangerous. Several delegates leaned forward. What? Someone asked. Adaptability. The word echoed through the hall. I expanded the display. Human history unfolded across the projection. Ice ages. Early tools. Agriculture. Industrial machines. Spacecraft. They evolved on a death world, I continued. A planet filled with predators, extreme climates, natural disasters, and biological threats. That is not unique, a representative interrupted. Many species originate on hostile worlds. Yes, I said. But most evolve specialized biological defenses to survive them. I paused. Humans did not. A ripple of confusion moved through the chamber. Instead, I said, they developed a different survival strategy. The projection shifted again. Stone tools, spears, fire, machines. They engineered their survival. Another delegate spoke. Tool use is common. Correct, I replied. But humans took tool use further than any species we have recorded. Images of human weapons appeared. Spears, bows, cannons, missiles. And eventually, the projection changed again. The chamber dimmed as the next footage played. A bright flash. A rising mushroom cloud. The hall went completely silent. They split the atom, I said, and created weapons capable of destroying their own civilization. Council Prime Thexalo spoke again. Against external threats? No. The chamber held its breath. Against themselves. The silence deepened. Finally one representative whispered what everyone was thinking. They nearly destroyed their own species. Yes. And yet they survived. Yes. How? I looked around the assembly. That was the true mystery of humanity. They refused to stop, I said. Another delegate spoke. Explain. Humans are not the fastest species on their world. No. They are not the strongest. No. They are not the best armed biologically. No. But when they encounter a problem, I brought up the mining station footage. The 5 humans improvising weapons, adapting the environment, outmaneuvering stronger opponents. They adapt until the problem stops existing. The chamber erupted into murmurs again. Council Prime Thexalo watched the footage carefully. Your report states that humans fought global wars, he said. Yes. Using increasingly destructive technology. Yes. And yet their civilization still exists. Yes. Why? I answered honestly. Because they learned. The council representatives exchanged uneasy looks. Slowly, I added. Painfully. But they learned. A tall insectoid delegate raised one limb. Your conclusion? I took a deep breath. Humans are dangerous, I said. But not because they are strong. I gestured toward the projection again. They are dangerous because they refuse to accept limits. I paused. If something is impossible, humans do not stop. They redefine the word impossible. The chamber went quiet again. Council Prime Thexalo spoke softly. And what do you recommend? My answer was simple. Admit them. Shock rippled across the hall. You recommend council membership for a Class 8 species? Yes. Why? I looked at the projection again. Jack Reeves smiling during the evaluation. They approached us peacefully. That proves nothing, someone argued. No, I agreed. But it proves curiosity. And curiosity built their civilization. Thexalo studied the chamber. The alternative? If we reject them, I said, they will continue developing alone. And eventually they will reach the wider galaxy. The chamber understood the implication immediately. And then, I said quietly, they may not ask to join us. The council fell silent. For a long time no one spoke. Finally Council Prime Thexalo raised his hand. Prepare the vote. Lights across the chamber activated. Green, red, yellow. Every species present would decide humanity's fate. And for the first time since beginning the evaluation, I realized something. The future of the galaxy might depend on the outcome. Humanity was accepted into the Galactic Council by a margin of 11 votes. 11. Out of nearly 300 civilizations, that was the difference between humanity joining the galaxy, or being isolated from it. When the vote was announced, the human delegation in the visitor gallery erupted into celebration. They shouted. They laughed. Some of them hugged each other. One human woman was crying, while smiling. At the time, I did not understand that reaction. Among most species, crying indicates distress or pain. Humans apparently cried when they were overwhelmed by joy. Was strange. Humans were strange. But they were now part of the council. And for 3 months, everything went smoothly. Suspiciously smoothly. Human diplomats proved curious but cooperative. Scientists from Earth eagerly exchanged knowledge. Trade discussions began. Joint exploration programs were proposed. Several council species even started cultural exchange programs. Humanity seemed determined to prove they deserved their place among the stars. Then the mining station incident happened. And suddenly my report looked incomplete. The emergency briefing arrived during one of my university lectures. I was explaining predator evolution to a group of young xenobiology students when my communicator chimed. Urgent priority. Council command channel. That never happened unless something had gone very wrong. I stepped outside the lecture hall and accepted the transmission. My supervisor appeared on the holographic display. Director Hordak. His expression was unusually tense. Clevith, he said, we have a situation. What kind of situation? Hostage crisis. My spine stiffened. Where? Mining Station KF-9. I recognized the name immediately. A remote extraction facility located in the outer asteroid belts. 200 personnel. Mixed species crew. Low security risk. What happened? I asked. Pirates. That was bad. The outer mining stations were vulnerable to raids. Usually the pirates targeted cargo shipments or rare minerals. Sometimes they took hostages. Which pirate group? I asked. Garvish raiders. That was worse. The Garvish were notorious for brutality. Heavily armored. Aggressive. And extremely well armed. How many ships? 12. My stomach chambers tightened. That was an assault fleet. How many crew on the station? 206. Security response? Already dispatched. Arrival in approximately 8 hours. 8 hours. That was survivable. Mining station protocols were clear. When pirates boarded, Surrender immediately or protect the crew or delay until rescue arrives. Most pirate raids ended with ransom negotiations. If everyone stayed calm, casualties were usually minimal. So what's the problem? I asked. Director Horthak hesitated. The humans? Of course. How many humans are on the station? 5. 5. Out of more than 200 crew. That should not affect the situation, I said. That's what we thought, Horthak replied. He sent a data packet. Watch the security footage. The recording opened. A storage bay inside the station. 23 hostages sat on the floor with their hands bound. 4 Garvish pirates guarded them. The pirates were enormous, over 2.5 meters tall, covered in thick natural armor plates. Each carried an energy rifle capable of punching through reinforced bulkheads. Among the hostages I spotted 2 humans. A woman named Dana Kslov. A man named Tommy Conqua. Both looked frightened. That was normal. Then Dana leaned toward Tommy and whispered something. Tommy nodded. She whispered to another hostage, a Riftian engineer. He looked confused, but he nodded too. Then everything happened at once. Dana suddenly screamed. A piercing sound of pure panic. Every pirate turned toward her. Exactly as she intended. Tommy moved instantly. He rolled across the floor, somehow pulling his bound hands under his legs and bringing them in front of his body. I paused the recording. That maneuver should not be possible, I muttered. Director Horthak said nothing. I resumed the video. 1 pirate fired. The shot missed, because the Riftian engineer suddenly kicked the pirate's leg from behind. Tommy reached a storage container, kicked it open, and pulled out a tool. A simple metal wrench. The pirate raised his rifle again. Tommy threw the wrench. Not at the pirate. At the overhead lights. The storage bay plunged into darkness. The next 12 seconds were chaos. Energy weapons fired blindly. Hostages scattered. Something crashed. Someone screamed. Then the emergency lighting activated. When the lights returned, the pirates were down. All 4 of them. Unconscious. Disarmed. The hostages were already cutting their restraints. And Dana, the botanist, was holding one of the energy rifles like she had used it her entire life. She checked the weapon's charge level calmly. Then looked at the other crew. Everyone okay? She asked. One of the hostages stared at her. How did you do that? Dana shrugged. We're human. She tossed him a rifle. Grab a weapon. The hostage looked horrified. There are 40 pirates on this station. Dana smiled. Yes. Are you insane? Probably. Then she said something that made my spines rise again. Good news though. What? There are 5 of us. The recording ended. I stared at the screen. 5 humans, I said slowly. Yes, Director Horthak replied. Against 40 pirates. Yes. What happened next? Horthak sent the next footage file. His voice was quiet. That, he said, is why I called you. I opened the file and watched the moment the galaxy realized something terrifying. Humans were not weak. They were simply creative. The second security recording began in a station corridor. 3 Garvish pirates marched 10 hostages toward the central hub. Their armor plates reflected the corridor lights like dark metal shields. Each pirate carried a rifle capable of cutting through station bulkheads. The hostages walked slowly, hands bound. The pirates looked completely confident. They should have been. Nothing on the station could challenge them. Then the gravity failed. Not everywhere. Just in that corridor. The hostages and pirates suddenly floated upward as the artificial gravity field shut off. The pirates struggled immediately. Their species was built for heavy gravity environments. Their massive armored bodies made movement in zero gravity awkward and slow. The hostages spun helplessly. And from a maintenance hatch in the ceiling, a human dropped down. Eric Vasquez. Geologist. No combat training. No military experience. He pushed himself off the wall and drifted silently behind the nearest pirate. The pirate noticed too late. Eric grabbed the pirate's rifle arm and twisted. Momentum did the rest. The pirate slammed into the wall hard enough to crack the armor plating. The other 2 pirates tried to aim their weapons. But in zero gravity, their movements were slow and clumsy. Eric moved like he had practiced this before. He grabbed the second pirate's rifle, kicked off the wall, and sent the alien spinning helplessly down the corridor. The third pirate fired. The shot burned across the ceiling. Eric had already pushed himself toward the environmental control panel. 3 quick strikes. Temperature regulation dropped instantly. The corridor began cooling. Fast. Very fast. Garvish were cold-blooded. Their muscles slowed rapidly in low temperatures. Within seconds the pirates were struggling to move. Eric floated calmly toward them, disarmed the last rifle, restored gravity, and helped the hostages stand up. One of them stared at him in disbelief. "How did you know that would work?" Eric shrugged. "Your species evolved in tropical climates," he said. "Cold slows you down." The hostage blinked. "You knew that?" Eric grinned. "Humans research our enemies." He handed the hostage a weapon. "Come on. There are more pirates." Then he climbed back into the maintenance shaft. The recording ended. I opened the next file immediately. Another corridor. 2 pirates guarding a doorway. A human woman approached them slowly. Lisa Park, medical technician. She held one hand against her stomach and looked pale. The pirates raised their weapons. "What are you doing here?" one of them growled. Lisa groaned weakly. "I think I'm poisoned," she said. The pirates exchanged confused looks. Lisa collapsed against the wall. "I need the medical bay," she gasped. The pirates hesitated. Garvish were brutal pirates. But they were not doctors. And they had strict instructions not to kill hostages unnecessarily. One pirate lowered his rifle slightly. "Stand up," he ordered. Lisa staggered toward them. Then she threw something into their faces. A liquid chemical. Both pirates screamed instantly. Their eyes burned. Their armor sensors overloaded. They stumbled backward blindly. Lisa calmly picked up one of their rifles. "That was cleaning solvent," she explained. "Not deadly." She paused. "But it stings." The recording switched again. Tommy Conqua. Inside an air duct. The duct was far too small for a human body. According to the station schematics. Tommy crawled through it anyway. Halfway through the duct he stopped. Dislocated his shoulder. Pulled himself forward. Then popped the joint back into place. When he dropped out of the ventilation shaft behind 2 pirates, he looked almost bored. The next file showed Dana again. Now surrounded by freed hostages. She had organized them into groups. Assigned them roles. Coordinated movement through the station. "How do you know what to do?" one alien asked. Dana shrugged. "I play strategy games." The alien blinked. "Games?" "Yeah." She handed him a rifle. "Turns out they're good training." The final recording opened. The station's central hub. The pirate captain stood there. Gordhack the Renderer. 3 meters tall. Armor thicker than most ship hull plating. 20 pirates with him. 30 hostages behind them. And 5 humans in the doorway. Dana, Tommy, Eric, Lisa, and David Ramos. The pirate captain laughed when he saw them. 5 soft mammals. Holding stolen weapons. "You think you can threaten me?" Gordhack growled. Dana stepped forward. "You should leave," she said calmly. "Take your ships and go." The pirate captain's laughter echoed through the chamber. "You have nothing." Eric spoke next. "We have patience." Tommy added quietly. "And experience." Lisa smiled slightly. "Humans have been taking hostages from each other for thousands of years." David finished the sentence. "We've gotten pretty good at resolving those situations." The pirate captain raised his rifle. The shot fired. And the humans exploded into motion. Dana dove left. Tommy rolled right. Eric leaped upward and grabbed a support beam on the ceiling. Lisa dragged 2 hostages behind cover. David kicked the control panel. The lights went out. The battle lasted 8 minutes. Not because the pirates were weak. Because the humans refused to fight fair. They shot out lighting systems. Collapsed cargo stacks. Triggered gas systems. Used hostages as cover angles. Exploited every weakness in Garvish physiology. Slow turning speed. Limited side vision. Heavy armor reducing mobility. They communicated without speaking. Hand signals. Eye contact. Pure instinct. When the lights came back on, the pirates were down. All of them. The hostages were free. And the 5 humans were sitting in the station cafeteria eating sandwiches. 30 minutes later, Council security forces arrived. They found 40 pirates tied up. And 200 survivors. When I finished watching the footage, I finally understood something. Humans did not win because they were strong. They won because they refused to accept losing. And that made them far more dangerous than anyone had realized. 3 days later, I stood once again before the Galactic Council assembly. But this time the atmosphere in the hall was very different. The previous meeting had been filled with curiosity. This one was filled with unease. Above the central chamber, the footage from mining station KF9 replayed across massive holographic displays. 5 humans. 40 pirates. 200 hostages. 8 minutes. That was all it had taken. Council Prime Thexalo watched the final recording carefully. The image froze on the moment the pirates were captured. The humans sitting calmly at a cafeteria table afterward. Eating. Laughing. Explaining something to the rescued crew about a strategy video game. The hall remained silent for several seconds. Then Thexalo spoke. Xenobiologist Clevith. Yes, Council Prime. Your original report classified humans as Class 8. That is correct. You described them as dangerous. Yes. Thexalo gestured toward the recording. And yet 5 civilian humans defeated 40 armed pirates without military training. That is also correct. A murmur spread across the chamber. One representative stood. You claimed they were dangerous. I did. Your report underestimated them. I took a slow breath. Yes. The entire chamber went quiet. Council Prime Thexalo leaned forward slightly. You believe your classification was incorrect? Yes. Should the rating be lowered? No. More murmurs. Thexalo tilted his crystalline head. Explain. I activated a new projection. Human history appeared again across the chamber. Stone tools. Agriculture. Industry. Space flight. I made a mistake during the first evaluation, I said. I judged humanity using the same framework we use for every other species. And? That framework does not apply to humans. A reptilian delegate spoke sharply. Every species fits the classification system. Not this one. The council chamber stirred uneasily. Explain your reasoning, Thexalo said. I expanded the projection again. Charts of biological traits appeared. Armor density. Natural weapons. Defensive adaptations. Most species filled the chart easily. Humans did not. They have none of these advantages, I said. No armor. No venom. No claws. No psychic abilities. No natural weaponry at all. A few delegates nodded. That is already known. Yes, I said. But the classification system assumes biological limitations. What do you mean? I switched the display again. Footage from the mining station. Humans adapting to the environment. Improvising weapons. Turning tools into strategy. Humans do not rely on biology. They rely on adaptation. I paused. And adaptation has no upper limit. The chamber grew quiet again. Council Prime Thexalo studied the footage. You are suggesting humans are unpredictable. Yes. And that makes them dangerous. Yes. But also valuable. Thexalo's crystalline structure shimmered thoughtfully. Continue. I brought up a list of the humans involved in the incident. Dana Kslav, botanist Tommy Conqua, engineer Eric Vasquez, geologist Lisa Park, medical technician David Ramos, communications specialist. None of these individuals were soldiers, I said. They were scientists, technicians, researchers. And yet they coordinated a tactical resistance operation that defeated a professional pirate crew. One delegate raised a limb. How? I answered honestly. Because humans prepare for danger constantly. The hall murmured again. They tell stories about survival. They create games about strategy. They study disasters. They simulate war. They train themselves to respond to impossible situations. I gestured toward the projection again. Every human child grows up hearing stories about individuals overcoming overwhelming odds. Heroes defeating monsters. Explorers surviving disasters. Ordinary people saving others. I paused. Those stories shape their thinking. Another delegate spoke. You are suggesting their culture trains them for crisis. Yes. And when real danger appears. I gestured toward the frozen image again. They respond. Council Prime Thexalo watched the image carefully. 5 humans standing together. Surrounded by defeated pirates. What classification do you recommend now? He asked. The chamber waited. I took a deep breath. None. The room exploded into shocked voices. No classification? That is impossible. Every species must have a threat level. I raised one hand. Humans cannot be measured using our current system. Silence returned slowly. Why? Thexalo asked. Because the classification system assumes species follow predictable patterns. And humans do not. I turned toward the assembly. Every species we have evaluated relies on what they are. Claws. Armor. Strength. Technology. Humans rely on something else. The council waited. What? Someone asked. Refusal. Confusion spread across the hall. Refusal to accept defeat, I explained. They refused to stop trying. They refused to accept limitations. They refused to believe something cannot be done. The projection changed again. Human history. Wars. Plagues. Disasters. Exploration. They have faced extinction events. They survived. They nearly destroyed themselves. They learned. They were weak. They adapted. They were outmatched. They improvised. I paused again. That is why they defeated the pirates. They did not fight like soldiers. They fought like humans. Council Prime Thexalo remained silent for a long moment. Then he asked the most important question. What do you recommend we do with a species like that? The entire galaxy waited for the answer. I looked at the image of the 5 humans again. Then I said the only honest thing I could. We stop trying to measure them. And we start trying to understand them. Thexalo's crystalline structure shimmered slowly. And if we fail? I smiled slightly. Then they will figure us out first. A quiet ripple of nervous laughter spread across the chamber. Because everyone in the room suddenly realized something. Humanity had not joined the Galactic Council to become powerful. They had joined because they were curious. And curiosity was the same force that had carried them from caves to the stars. 3 months after the mining station incident, I received a new assignment. Human Integration Specialist. The title sounded simple. The job was not. My responsibility was to help Council species understand humans, and help humans understand the rest of the galaxy. It quickly became the most exhausting work of my entire career. Because humans did not behave like any species we had ever studied. They asked questions constantly. Not just about technology or trade. About everything. Why certain species evolved certain ways. Why Council protocols were written the way they were. Why the Council avoided exploring certain dangerous sectors. Why some species refused contact with others. They questioned assumptions most civilizations had accepted for thousands of cycles. And then they did something even stranger. They made friends. Humans seemed capable of forming emotional bonds with almost any species they encountered. Within weeks, human researchers were working alongside insectoid engineers, crystalline mathematicians, aquatic diplomats, and silicon-based physicists. They laughed together, shared meals, argued, collaborated. It made absolutely no biological sense. And yet it worked. Humans also kept doing things that terrified the rest of the Council. They volunteered for dangerous exploration missions. They signed up for hazardous rescue operations. They proposed creating multi-species emergency response teams to handle disasters and pirate attacks. When I asked why they would willingly put themselves in danger like that, the human ambassador simply shrugged. Someone has to help. That answer continued to disturb me. Because most species valued safety. Humans valued possibility. One afternoon I was reviewing integration reports in my office when a familiar human appeared in the doorway. Jack Reeves. The schoolteacher who had represented humanity during the evaluation. Now he wore a council liaison uniform. Hey Clevith, he said cheerfully. Got a minute? For you, Human Reeves, I have several. He stepped inside and sat down across from my desk. The same relaxed posture he had displayed during the evaluation. For a moment we simply looked at each other. Then Jack spoke. I wanted to thank you. For what? For recommending humanity for council membership. I tilted my head slightly. You are aware the vote was extremely close. Yeah, he said. We heard. Some council members wanted Earth quarantined. Jack nodded slowly. I figured. Yet you are grateful. Of course. He leaned forward slightly. You gave us a chance. That answer surprised me. You assume my recommendation was motivated by generosity. Wasn't it? No. Jack looked curious. Then why did you recommend us? I considered the question carefully. Humans valued honesty. So I gave him the honest answer. Because I believe humanity is terrifying. Jack burst out laughing. That's fair. You are fragile. True. You are emotionally unstable. Sometimes. You created weapons capable of destroying yourselves. Also true. You evolved on a death world and survived through sheer stubbornness. Jack nodded. Yeah, that sounds about right. I folded my upper limbs together. You have no biological advantages that should allow your species to dominate its world. Jack smiled slightly. And yet we did. Yes. Does that bother you? It fascinates me. Jack leaned back in his chair. So what's the verdict now? You are still terrifying. But. I paused. But you may be exactly what the galaxy needs. Jack raised an eyebrow. That's a big compliment coming from someone who once called us a biological accident. You are a biological accident. He laughed again. But you are also something else. What's that? Proof that survival is not determined by strength. Jack was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. Yeah, he said softly. That's kind of our thing. He stood up and extended his hand, the human greeting gesture I had learned during our earlier meetings. I returned it. His grip was firm. Warm. We won't disappoint you, he said. I suspect you will disappoint me frequently. Jack grinned. Probably. Then he left. After he was gone, I returned to my work. Another proposal from the human delegation had just arrived. They wanted to create a new organization. A multi-species emergency response program designed to help any civilization facing disaster. Pirate attacks. Planetary catastrophes. First contact emergencies. The project name caught my attention. Project Guardian. A team of volunteers from multiple species. Led primarily by humans. I stared at the proposal for a long time. 6 months earlier, I had evaluated humanity as a possible threat. Now I was watching them attempt to protect the entire galaxy. Later that day I walked through the council corridors toward the diplomatic quarter. Mixed groups of species passed by. Humans laughing with insectoid engineers. A crystalline child asking a human scientist about Earth's oceans. A reptilian trader teaching 2 humans how to speak his language. 6 months ago none of this had existed. Now it was becoming normal. As I watched the scene unfold, a realization slowly formed in my mind. When humanity first applied to join the Galactic Council, we believed we were admitting a new species into our civilization. But the truth was something else entirely. Humans had not joined the galaxy to become powerful. They had joined because they believed something impossible. That different species could work together. That enemies could become allies. That the universe could be better than it currently was. It was an absurd belief. Completely irrational. Statistically unlikely. And yet humans believed it with absolute certainty. I watched a group of alien children gather around a human child playing a strategy game on the floor of the corridor. The human explained the rules enthusiastically. The others listened carefully. Then they began playing together. And I realized something important. The Galactic Council had not adopted humanity. Humanity had adopted us. And somehow, despite the chaos they created, despite the danger they brought, despite their refusal to follow any rules evolution had intended, the galaxy was already becoming better because they were here. Humans do not simply survive. They adapt. They innovate. And eventually, they improve everything they touch. Even the galaxy itself. And that, I believe, is the most human trait of all.